Back in 2024, we did 2 videos on archetypes shown off in the various Yu-Gi-Oh anime, and then we sat back and waited to see what would get printed, since they're always adapting old anime cards into the real-life game on a yearly basis. And none of the archetypes we spoke about got printed, but a few of the individual cards did, so I guess it's coming along. In the meantime, why don't we reopen the past and see what other archetypes never got brought over from the anime that deserve a shot. As with the other videos on this topic, we'll look at how these cards were played in the anime and discuss what might have to be changed to make them competitive or even just playable. And joining me again is my co-host with more Yu-Gi-Oh knowledge than one human should have, Sam from Dungeon Dive Bar.
My anime-only archetype is dice.
What kind of dice?
Gun dice!
Now, let's rewind the top 10 Yu-Gi-Oh anime archetypes that still don't exist. Number 10, Lamp, aka the Lajin archetype. I'm surprised Konami hasn't released these cards yet. They'd print money. Well, that's an exaggeration, but archetypes based around monsters from the original anime naturally get attention due to nostalgia. However, this specific archetype isn't even from the original anime. It was in the Arc 5 anime, used by a minor duelist named Halil. Original Lajin, however, was a fixture of the Duel Monsters anime, being a signature monster of Kaiba, where he was just a normal level 4 genie fiend with 1800 attack. So in real life, he was good in the early formats since he had big attack for a standard normal summon, and he had a lamp that special summons him from the hand and protects him from attacks. It was a trap in the anime, but a monster in real life. Arc 5 expanded the Lajin lore, seemingly for a throwaway deck, since all of Halil's duels were either losses or just in the background. As a result, this archetype wasn't very developed. It was just a fusion deck with a mild burn theme and a really good spell negate. Both the new lamps have effects when they're special summoned, and they were both monsters like the original lamp when it was brought over to the real life card game. Red lamp deals 600 burn damage, and purple lamp searches polymerization. And then you use that polymerization to fuse Lajin with the red lamp to create Fire Jin, the flame genie of the lamp. His effect is 600 burn damage on summon, and if he's destroyed by battle, you can tribute one lamp monster and destroy the monster that destroyed it, and also 600 more burn damage. The destruction effect seems like it would not need a tribute with the modern pace of the game, but overall, it's burn damage all the time, baby. To expand this archetype, maybe add in other elemental Lajin fusions that do other things like set up a negate, or make it where every monster you control can get lamped, where you can withdraw them and resummon them to avoid effects and attacks. We only saw him fuse with red lamp, so it seems like he should have fusions based around the other colored lamps, but we just didn't get to see them because the duelist was so minor.
The lamp is really the thing, so it could be a union archetype or equip spells that focus on Lajin, kind of like Phantasm Spiral. So you could be tribute one Lajin equipped with whatever color lamp or whatever material lamp you want, and that's your fusion summon, kind of like a modern day metamorphosis. And when that Jin is destroyed, special summon one Lajin and equip it with a lamp except for a lamp mentioned on this card, so that you can't just go right back into it. So like if the Fire Genie is destroyed, you can summon Lajin and equip it with purple lamp or blue lamp or whatever color exists. That's out. I just think it would be a really cool way to cycle and once again make use of cards like Unexpected Die or Painful Decision, because I like my level 4 normal monsters.
Finally, I mentioned they have a really good spell negate, being their continuous trap, Absorbing Lamp. Whenever your opponent activates a spell, negate it and then you can steal it, but it returns to them if Absorbing Lamp ever leaves the field. This is a crazy trap, right? I'm not misreading it? No once per turn, just a full lockout of spell cards and you take them, so they don't even get a graveyard effect if they have them. If they made this once per turn, maybe it could be printed, but regardless, I feel this would be the MVP of the lamp deck. Number 9, Dragon Lady. It's interesting how the original anime has its distribution of cards printed. Anything that was in the manga, pretty much guaranteed, except Great White Terror for some reason. However, if it was in any of the 3 filler arcs or a filler duel, there was either a long wait or radio silence. You would think they would want to get all the original anime cards out there for the sake of nostalgia. Virtual World had most of its cards printed, Orichalcomylos's arc had some of the cards printed with a few key archetypes missing, but the arc that feels like it gets no love is the Kaiba Corp Grand Prix. Pretty much any new cards and archetypes introduced in this arc not from the Von Schroeder brothers just never get mentioned, and I don't tend to see anyone clamor for them like I do with stuff like Valen's armor from the arc before it. So we're gonna focus on this arc for the Duel Monsters era reps on this list, and I want to start with a character that I just think is neat, Vivian Wong. I'm an Amazoness player, Dragon Lady appeals to my monster design interests. She plays a pile of already existing monsters, and then a couple of new ones, Kung Fu Nyan Nyan, and her ace, Dragon Lady, with a few new spells in there that were generic that she used on Dragon Lady. Since none of her cards are related, I would probably retune them to have an archetype, maybe call it Kung Fu since that was Vivian's theme, and in the name of her new Nyan Nyan monster, and then retrain her main deck monsters to support getting out other Kung Fu cards that end with the boss, Dragon Lady. Make a newer Master Kyonshi and Kung Fu Gyakugiri Panda, and that Gyakugiri between Kung Fu and Panda is doing heavy lifting preventing a copyright issue. Dragon Lady is one of those slow early Yu-Gi-Oh monsters that can only be summoned with a specific spell card, Luminous Clouds, but she locks you out of all special summoning for the turn that she's summoned, and she can destroy a spell or trap on the field once per turn, but you cannot attack the turn you do that, so you have to choose one or the other.
I want to talk about some of her monster lineup. One of her cards is Sky Dragon, a level 6 vanilla with 1900 attack and 1800 defense. I just love that that is certainly a card that exists. She also played both Kiryu and Pitch Dark Dragon, but did not run Dark Blade.
I'd say throw out everything except the back row destruction. Since it's a fighting themed card from the original anime when battling was important, I think Dragon Lady and the rest of the Kung Fu cards should be battle oriented, where they destroy anything when attacks are declared, and maybe your opponent cannot activate anything in response to. And she can also destroy a card on the field to go with her old effect. She can be summoned a standard way now, but we could also have it where Luminous Clouds is just another free way to summon her, and it's searchable by one of the retrained Kung Fu cards to make it easy to get to. Finally, Vivian had all of her generic spells, which you could change to only work with this archetype. Flying Dragon Whirl lets you send up to 4 dragons from your hand to the graveyard to gain 300 attack per dragon. Lightning Saber was an equipped spell that gave Dragon Lady 300 attack, and halved a monster's attack points if the equipped monster was destroyed. And Snowfall Sword was a quick play spell that negates a spell or trap if a monster equipped with a card is on the field. I'd probably give these effects way more protection for Dragon Lady and probably a bigger attack boost, so she doesn't get nuked by modern Yu-Gi-Oh mechanics. Maybe something like Mikanko, where she has effects that can equip the swords directly from the deck, and she cannot be targeted or she's unaffected by card effects. Then the quick play spell is still pretty good, but make it an Omni Negate. I feel this archetype would boil down to having a single monster that needs a lot of protection, but hey, with enough indestructibility, sometimes that cheeses out a win.
I just think we could use an archetype of equip spell support again that is not just about Mikanko. I just really like equip spells and want them to be a better mechanic. Because, especially given her deck is, and I quote from the wiki, an Asian-themed martial arts deck focused around Dragon Lady. There are so many ways you can make that a Journey to the West related thing, or the 4 cardinal beasts. The Azure Dragon, the Vermilion Bird, the White Tiger, and the Black Tortoise. Add another one to the turtle list, alongside the Giant Tortoise who feasts on flames. The 4 Sacred Beasts from Yu Hakusho are based off of them.
I mean, half her deck were felines, so she has the making for that theme.
Yeah, but I think if they did reach Soul Tiger, she had Soul Tiger? Yeah, so there, she had a tiger. Actually, no, you know what? Never mind, canceled. One of her cards is just dump 4 dragons from your deck to the graveyard. Archetype canceled. Could you imagine if dragons got a Snake Rain? Yeah, alright, Vivian canceled. Vivian is canceled.
They could just not print that one.
They could just not print it, also. Yeah, Vivian canceled, though.
Number 8, Masked Knight. The first arc of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds had a lot of new cards and archetypes for the non-main characters that tend to be forgotten by time. Most of them got printed, but they weren't very good. Though surprisingly, the treasure deck that just dealt burn damage to the user in the anime ended up being pretty unique with the extra effects they added when it got printed. However, one group of cards from this this time period that's always intrigued me were the Masked Knights, in part due to them never being printed. They were used by the throwaway knight-themed opponent that Aki faced in the first round of the first tournament of 5Ds, so he was very insignificant, so maybe that's why they never got printed. But so were all the other early throwaway duelists in 5Ds that got their cards printed, like that Professor or the Iron Chain guy, so why not the Knight? Masked Knight was a level-up series of monsters where they dealt burn damage, and that was it since it was still 2008 and the duelist was a jobber. Level 3 dealt 400 burn damage, and you cannot attack if you do that. Then you could send it to the graveyard during your standby phase to summon level 5, who does 1000 damage but can't attack if you do that. And then you can send him to the graveyard during your next standby phase to summon level 7, who can inflict 1500 damage but is still able to attack since he's the boss. The end. He had a few other generic cards that were exclusive to the anime too, like the Trap Level Change, which can special summon a level monster from the graveyard, or Glory Shield, which gives your monster the Ancient Gear Golem effect of not letting your opponent activate back row until the end of the damage step, or Martyr Flag, which lets you send a monster from hand or field to the graveyard to double all warriors' attack power. These do seem like realistic average cards a warrior or level duelist would play in real life, so they're not that bad, and then the rest of his deck were already existing cards.
He doesn't even play any of the good warrior toolbox cards. Although I will give him credit, he did in fact play Sakuretsu Armor. I respect him for that.
The Knights were put in Duel Links where their burn damage was halved and they were slow and unusable. The best I could say for revamping this archetype is do what Vrains did with Allure Queen, another level monster, where she got a link that turbos out the other level versions of herself and turns their effects into quick effects. Only for the Knights, instead of the quick effect, double their burn damage, let them attack, and increase their attack power. It's probably still not that good, but at least it seems competent. Number 7, Game Show. This is one of those archetypes that seems like it could only work in the anime, but maybe we can do something with it. It was used by the one-off opponent, Bob Banter in GX, who was a student that had the presentation of a game show host. His deck revolved around Quiz Hour, a continuous spell which is essentially a Jeopardy board, where it lets you set quiz panel monsters from your deck that your opponent attacks into to activate their flip effects, which are either trivia questions about other cards or challenges. If your opponent gets the question wrong or fails the challenge, destroy the monster that attacked and they take 500 to 1200 burn damage depending on the quiz panel. If they get it right or complete the challenge, the monster stays and you take the burn damage. There are also 3 types of quiz panels representing the 3 Egyptian gods / Duel Academy dorms, and also the quiz panels let you set the next level higher of each panel when it's destroyed to keep the quiz show going.
Let's start with the Obelisk cards. You know, there's only 9 of them. I'm going to read them all out just because some of them are relatively normal and the others are very insane. Obelisk 10. Name the 3 cards needed to activate Huge Revolution. Pretty easy. And then let's go look at Obelisk 20. What is the total number of levels of monsters in both players' graveyards? And you might be thinking, oh, that's pretty easy to check. The card says you get 10 seconds to answer them. I don't know what the total level is. Unless you're playing against a Pendulum deck, you have to keep track of that stuff. And then Obelisk 30. Name 3 cards that can cause an alternate victory condition. Now, at the time, there were a lot fewer cards that had that list. There were 6 answers, one of which was also anime only, but now there's a ton of them. Here's my favorite one. It's Raw 10. You ready for this one, Mr. Top 10 List? Say Gaga Gigo, Giga Gaga Giga, and go Giga Gaga Gigo 3 times.
Okay, Gaga Gigo, Giga Gaga Gigo, go Giga Gaga Gigo, Gaga Gigo, Giga Gaga. Oh, okay.
You can't do it. It's insane to do. Only someone like me who actually has practiced that for a PowerPoint could do that.
Next up is Raw 20.
This is one that also has an unwinnable scenario in Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Your opponent draws 1 card and reveals it. The card text must be less than 50 letters. And then Raw 30. Choose 1 card from your deck. Your opponent must guess the number of monsters pictured on this card. It's so oblique and specific. And then the Slifer ones are equally as absurd. Do 20 push-ups. Slifer 10 is, how many turns have passed since the start of this duel? Which, again, in something like Master Duel that tracks that's not that big a deal. And then Slifer panel 30. Hold your breath for 1 minute, which in the dub was drink a bowl of water in 1 minute. So I don't know what was up with any of that stuff.
It's probably different because 4Kids was afraid children would try to imitate holding their breath underwater for a minute, so they changed it to be, no, Jaden just has to drink a whole bowl of water and he's doing it in this unorthodox way. Don't worry about it.
And these effects archetypes absolutely have no place in Yu-Gi-Oh! It just does not make sense. I don't know if this could ever be done, and I don't think I really want it to, but it'd be cool if they ever figure it out.
If he runs out of panels, he has the monster Quizzer Panel 9 to shuffle them all back into the deck and reset everything. The major issue with this archetype is there's a limited number of questions, and generally, asking your opponent to do challenges is not really applicable in the real life card game, with the exception of rock, paper, scissors, or asking for a handshake. And just asking for the action of a handshake, you don't actually have to do it. The best I could say for adapting this archetype is all of its quiz show effects would have to be like the less than 50 words effect, where it relies on a measurable game of chance based on a card. Maybe your opponent draws a card or selects a monster from their deck, and if it's over or under a certain level or stat value, or maybe a type or attribute, it deals the burn damage. Or even other guessing effects, like how Spiral has you guess the top card of your opponent's deck based on a monster, spell, or trap. You could even add in a coin flip mechanic like Dark Sanctuary or Misjudge, where it negates an attack or effect based on a coin flip to add in the extra bit of chance. Maybe besides the burn damage, you could also add a figurative timer to your opponent, where it mills or banishes the cards from the top of their deck like Runic or Kashtira. It's sort of a beat the clock scenario before they cannot draw anymore. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was established on these games of chance, so even though it's unreliable, it would make for a silly gimmick deck. Number 6. New Order. This was used by Elephas, who is the protector of the Astral World, which is one of the various alternate worlds in Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal, being a realm of order. If you're a threat of chaos, Elephas will duel you, so he's all business. There's no fun allowed with him, but he still looks pretty cool. The New Order archetype consists only of Xyz monsters, along with spells and traps in the main deck that cheat out the Xyz monsters from the extra deck. Mysterious Monolith is a continuous spell that can count as materials for a rank 4 monster, and the trap Ascension Spiral can banish an Xyz monster destroyed that turn to special summon another one that's 2 ranks higher, so you can keep on building after your monoliths make your rank 4. Each Xyz monster is based on an Egyptian god, which is something Yu-Gi-Oh! Is no stranger to. Your rank 4 starter, Anubis, recovers spells and traps that were destroyed, Apophis reduces a monster's attack by 2000, Sebek searches any spell or trap, gotta nerf that one if these ever get printed, Horus destroys cards on the field based on the difference between you and your opponent's cards if they control more, and Mahes has the most unique effect, where you can special summon all monsters under it used as material, and then put them back as material during the end phase. I feel all these cards could exist if you tone them down a little. They were just meant to be overpowered for the anime to be a big test for Yuma. Though the one card I haven't mentioned is their boss, the rank 13 Amon, who can only be summoned with a rank up magic spell card, has 5000 attack and defense, and cannot be destroyed by battle or card effect. But who's destroying it by battle with 5000 attack points? Its effect goes crazy though. Attach a number of cards from the top of your opponent's deck to it as materials, equal to the difference in ranks between it and one face-up Xyz monster your opponent controls. And when one Xyz monster is summoned by your opponent, you do that again. Funny enough, that effect is useless if your opponent doesn't play Xyz monsters, but if they do, what the hell? It's a rank 13! That's way too good, there's gonna be a lot of cards you're attaching. I'm not sure if this would be too much of a nerf, but I think the best way to do it is where it just takes one like Time Thief Redoer or Cyber Dragon Infinity.
They don't do anything. They're a beat stick that sometimes have disruption effects. It's kind of a nothing burger in they don't do anything. They're just big number big, and I appreciate a big number big. They're the first time anything with a level or rank over 12 existed, with New Order 13, Etheric Amon.
It's just a shame he really doesn't have anything in the main deck to go off of.
He played spells and traps. He didn't play a single monster. He used spells to summon themselves as monsters, which is a crazy concept. Imagine having a spell card that just says, this is a level 4 monster for an Xyz summon. It's crazy. And he played a lot of anti-Xyz cards, so they wouldn't need to be retooled to be more generic, because we don't live in a reality where Xyz is the only extra deck method, except for that one time Kaito summoned Twin Photon Lizard.
Actually, in our other secondary signature monster list, you yelling Twin Photon Lizard is the most replayed moment.
I did do that. I did yell that. Twin Photon Lizard!
Final note, New Order is abbreviated as capital NO on the card in Japanese, which is a reference to how the number Xyz monsters are abbreviated as capital N lowercase o in Japanese. Just wanted to point that out since I think it's neat. Number 5, Gem Dragons. We have another Grand Prix archetype. archetype. This was used by Rebecca Hawkins, which we got a sneak peek of in her tag duel against Valen in the Waking the Dragons arc, but it was on full display in the Grand Prix. It used the existing dragons based on gems, which were localized as Luster Dragon, with the smaller Luster Dragon being called Sapphire Dragon in Japanese, and the bigger one being Emerald Dragon in Japanese. The anime added in a third dragon called Ruby Dragon, which we could call Luster Dragon number 3 in spirit, and it was definitely a budget-saving design since it was just a red version of the smaller Luster Dragon with the same pose and 300 less attack and defense. Its lore was even the same, just replace Ruby with Sapphire and attack with defense, even though it has worse defense than its palette swap. The big gimmick here is Rebecca uses the anime-exclusive spell card Adamantine Sword Revival, which tributes a dragon and summons their boss, Diamond Head Dragon, who just gains the attack of the dragons tributed to summon it plus 1,000 attack points.
I like how this series of monsters is related to so many different cards that it's just mind-boggling what they're connected to. They're connected to the bonding cards, Hydrogeddon, Oxygeddon, etc. Because in the anime, Carboneddon's effect specifically summoned Hyozanryu because it was carbon being compressed into a diamond. In the real world, Carboneddon's effect is any level 7 or lower normal dragon monster, which all of them qualify for. It's strange to me how these seemingly unconnected yet related cards have so many correlations to other archetypes. Plus, a fun fact is they are the first series of cards to ever be shown in an alternate rarity in the anime. Chaz's brother, I believe it was Slade, used them against Chaz, and they were all parallel rares, so they all had rainbow effects when they were used in the anime. And I just think that's really neat. They never really address rarity outside of there's only 4 blue eyes in the whole world.
As you can probably tell, this archetype is nothing spectacular playstyle-wise, but I mainly want it for completion, since it references some classic cards that I feel like could have a bit more going on with them. In fact, they kind of made this an archetype already, just without any of the original monsters. There's an archetype called Primite, which are earth dragons based on ore, which are rocks containing metal or minerals, similar to gems, and Primite have effects that search and summon normal monsters, along with activating based around them. And you know what else are normal monsters? All the gem dragons. So some fans feel that the Primite archetype was made with the gem dragon theming in mind. Because of that, I don't know if we need a gem dragon archetype on its own. I just think the gem dragons could be integrated into new Primite support. Just take the 2 that were exclusive to the anime, add Primite to their names, and then retrain the other Luster dragons and adjacent dragons to be involved with Primite. You could even make them a sub-archetype, where you call them Primite Luster Dragon. If they did go with this plan, and since Primite's already a very strong archetype on its own, you might not even need to revamp something like Diamond Head Dragon as a boss for them. He can just be Big Dragon Boss that attacks with big number. Maybe just make that number a bit bigger. Plus 3,000 attack! Yahaha! Number 4, Gatling Ogre. The Crash Town arc of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds had a Wild West style villain named Lawton. He ran the Corrupt Mines, and his deck focused around the monster Gatling Ogre. This deck is built like a modern day one-turn kill deck that only uses effect damage, but in a very simple form. For the duels that are meant to show its max power, Lawton plays Gatling Ogre, whose effect lets you send one spell or trap to the graveyard to deal 800 damage, and this is unlimited per turn, so he just gets lucky and has 5 other cards he can set in the back row on his first turn, so 5 times 800 is 4,000, which is the total life points for anime duels, and he just wins like that. But just like real life OTKs, it can be stopped by Effect Veiler. Nice meta tactic there, you say. Once Gatling Ogre fails, Lawton has a whole bunch of other gun ogres that center around burn damage. Blaster Ogre lets you destroy your opponent's monsters and inflict burn damage based on their attack. Full Armor Ogre deals 1,000 burn damage when it destroys a monster in battle, and Big Cannon Ogre doubles battle damage, but it's very particular with its summoning conditions, where you have to tribute a Gatling Ogre while you have Full Armor Ogre in your graveyard, and that feels like such an unnecessary layer. It does have the bonus effect where when it's destroyed, you can summon Full Armor Ogre from the graveyard, so you'd want it there anyway if you summon him, but still, it's too specific. Maybe nowadays they would make it where you can special summon him by tributing any ogre if there's another ogre in your graveyard, but that's my main fix for that. With the archetype being small, I feel they need a few other cards to search and summon the ogres out of deck to get that burn damage. Maybe add in a Tuner Ogre and a bigger boss ogre who's a synchro monster, since they were in 5Ds after all, and one of the tuners could even be from tokens, since another aspect of Lawn's deck were his spells and traps, which either had generic effects with a Wild West theme, or once again, dealt with burn damage. Some of them were existing burn damage cards, but the most interesting one to me was Back Attack Ambush, which was a trap that summons tokens that you could tribute for more burn damage. They were called ambush tokens, just make them tuners too.
They're Fire Fiend. Okay, I think retrain them as Dark Fiends and have them work with Bandit Keith's cards, with the other gun archetype of Yu-Gi-Oh! And have a fusion related to that, because they're also Gatling Dragon, Revolver/Barrel Dragon. I think it would be a really cool thing to do with Bandit Keith's cards, because it is about destroying things with a big gun and then also dealing damage with a big gun. He did have a spell card called Double Arms that double the effect damage inflicted. That's pretty neat.
Overall, the gun ogres were cool in concept, and if you like burn damage, why not print them for those wonky yet fragile OTKs? Number 3, Storm Rider. Being a Vrain's archetype of a major character, this one comes constructed right out of the tin. As seen with the other two lists, the second season villains never got their archetypes printed. Nothing for the lead villain Lightning or the Shades of Grey villain Bowman, or for this entry, Windy, who was the second in command of the Ignis. Thankfully, he did not use Judgment Arrows like his partners, so we don't have to work around another archetype that uses a spell that produces link arrows from the back row. With Windy being the Wind Ignis, Storm Rider is a Wind Cyberse archetype whose aesthetic combines air vehicles with other winged creatures, and the effects are reactive mostly to spells and traps of your opponent. A monster like Storm Rider Griffor can special summon itself if your opponent controls a monster, but even if they don't, it has an extra effect where if your field is empty, you can look at your opponent's hand, set a spell or trap from it if they have any, and then special summon the monster. Storm Rider Skyfisher is similar, only it makes your opponent set a back row from the graveyard instead. Then you can combo these styles of effects with Storm Rider Hippogriff, which lets you special summon if your opponent has a card in their back row, and if they have just one, you can force your opponent to send it to the graveyard. So all of this combined is like a version of hand ripping with extra steps. Moving to their Link monsters, they also benefit if you don't have any back row. If their Link 2 Bahamut Bomber is summoned when you control no back row, it can destroy one of your opponent's cards, and it has a quick effect to destroy an additional spell or trap as well. Another Link 2 Rockbuster can destroy 2 spells or traps if you have an empty back row, and it lets you set traps from your opponent's graveyard when they special summon a Link 3 or higher. And their boss monster, Custom Bahamut Bomber, lets you put one of your opponent's monsters in the back row if you control no back row, and it has a quick effect to destroy all cards in the spell and trap card zone to follow up on that. Also, the Link monsters deal burn damage whenever they destroy spells and traps to give you some extra advantage. Finally, their field spells only work if you control one Link monster, but they're pretty good floodgates and they force your opponent to attack. Storm Rider Turbulence negates the effects of any Link summoned monsters by your opponent until their next standby phase, and your opponent cannot respond to this effect. Their other field, Storm Rider Blast, negates the effects of any Link monsters with an equal or lower Link rating to your own Link monster. The one thing is, these field spells are basically useless if your opponent doesn't play Link monsters, but still, I think they're neat. They even have a monster, Gargoyle, who can activate the fields directly from the deck by tributing itself when your opponent activates a field spell or effect of their own, along with being able to banish itself if you control a Storm Rider field to activate another one from the deck.
You could even run Denko Sekka in it, or Sekka's Light, because yeah, you don't want cards to sit in your spell and trap zone. So a card that says draw 2, you can't activate any more spells or traps for the duel, or while this card's on the field, no one can set spells or traps. You got a good control. Or even then, they're Cyberse, because others I'd say you could play Dark Simorg with them, whose effect also prevents setting. There's a lot you could do with it, and I would love to see them play it, because the idea of a wind-focused deck that punishes the opponent for playing spells and also doesn't work if you set spells or traps, that's just nuts. I just think it's really cool.
Overall, this is a solid archetype that I'm sure we'll see someday, just whenever Konami feels like releasing it. Number 2, Ancient. Here's the final archetype from the Grand Prix on this list. This was used by Grandpa Moto, and you would think his cards should have gotten adapted by now, and you'd be be right. Konami attributes all the Exodia-related cards as his signature monsters. But for when he got a full archetype based around his career, it was ignored by Konami. Ancient is an archetype based around going in temples that are thousands of years old, guarded by rock monsters. The deck's main gimmick is punishing players for not attacking by dealing burn damage. Part of the strategy involves getting Ancient Giant on the field, which is the monster that deals the burn damage if the opponent doesn't attack, and Solomon would also play cards like Ordeal of a Traveler, which can negate attacks, to ensure the opponent gets punished, and then he had smaller stone giants that only deal burn damage to the user if they don't attack. I get that this is because it was the original anime where duels were slower, but if it got printed now, you would either have to deal burn damage to the opponent too, or there would have to be a big benefit to losing your life points, like maybe you deal double burn damage back to your opponent. The rest of the archetype revolved around building the Ancient City, which was a field spell that needed the Giant and two other ancient continuous spells, Ancient Tome and Ancient Gate. Tome lets you exchange a card in your hand for whatever's on the top of your deck, and Gate just exists. Its only effect says you can activate it if the city is up. It's basically like Toon World just being a continuous spell that you pay 1,000 life points for. Once you have everything on the field, you get to summon the boss Ancient Dragon, whose effect is if it destroys a monster in battle, you then get to destroy all of your opponent's defense position monsters. So it's just Red Dragon Archfiend. The city also lets you revive it at the end phase if it's destroyed, so it can stick around.
I want to go off about the Ancient archetype. I love the concept of this because the way it worked is it is the most convoluted summoning method possible. It requires 7 different cards according to the anime. Then you play a field spell to summon Ancient Dragon, who's a 2800 attack monster, which does not have a summoning restriction. This archetype is a complete mess, and I love it to pieces because it's the only time Solomon got to do a duel, and he played something befitting the guy who taught the King of Games. It's an incredibly complex combo deck that can lock down the opponent, shut down their plays, summon a powerful monster, eradicate defensive lines. All things considered, if they actually did anything, it would be an incredibly good archetype. And just, I liked how at the tail end of Duel Monsters, there were these decks that were about these increasingly long and convoluted combos, foreshadowing the entire game, by the way, of its future iterations, and just doing weird stuff. They're like, what do we care? We're not getting money anymore. Let's go nuts.
This archetype is definitely too slow and underdeveloped for today, and relies on needing a lot of cards at once, but for updating it, I think they could lean into the burn damage if your opponent doesn't attack, along with adding basic protection to the ancient monsters so they can survive until the battle phase. Add effects to some of the continuous spells, where your opponent cannot attack under certain conditions to force the burn damage, and also make a trade-off in the style of Yugioh, where some of them are immune to battle damage and maybe can dish it right back out to the opponent, or even force the opponent into defense mode to enable the Dragon's effect. And if all of that ends up being too slow, well, what do you expect? It's thematic. They're ancient after all. For number 1, we went with the funny option. This archetype was not fleshed out at all since it was from a one-off duel in the anime, but I feel anyone who has seen GX remembers this duel for the absurdity it packed into 10 minutes. Number 1, the Drunken or Dizzy archetype. This was from an early episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, where Chumley's father wanted to remove him from the school since he was a bad student and recruit him to work at his sake factory. So they have a duel to see if he stays or goes. What made this duel so memorable was the father's motif and archetype. He used drunken or dizzy monsters who clutched to their bottle, and spells that facilitated burn damage. Something we didn't notice until late into making this list is we chose a lot of burn damage decks. That seemed to be a go-to option for the anime writers when they had nothing. But before we get into the playstyle, a big reason people wanted to see this archetype is the theming. Yes, it's all about sake and drunk monsters, but since it was dubbed by 4Kids Entertainment and planned for kids TV in the West during daytime hours, they felt they had to censor the alcohol, which I do kinda get. I don't know too many kids shows at the time that showed characters getting drunk without it being behind a layer of innuendo. As a result, 4Kids censored all the alcohol in the episode to be hot sauce, with the reference being that these characters and monsters were on the sauce, which is a term for drinking alcohol, and that was something that actually made it funnier to me, somewhat unintentionally, but even the intended sauce humor was still funny. Also the fact that when the characters were drinking sake, it was changed to cups of hot sauce, which is pretty hardcore that they're just downing hot sauce and nothing else. And just to clarify, I'm not saying I support them censoring it, I'm against censorship, I just understand why they felt like they had to do this censor compared to the other frivolous 4Kids censorships we've seen in the past. For the playstyle, it revolves around the continuous spell Flipping the Table, which lets you destroy all other cards you control once per turn, and then you destroy cards your opponent controls equal to the number of cards that were destroyed by this effect. The only restriction is you can't normal summon for the rest of the turn, so it's a trade-off of having monsters or getting the destruction effect, though now you could work around it easily with special summoning, but maybe it would be more restrictive if printed today. Regardless, that's a pretty solid effect, especially because he has other cards that like being destroyed. His other big spell is one bottle of sake, aka hot sauce bottle. Once this card is destroyed, deal 500 burn damage, and that's it, but it was early GX, so that was good enough. As for his main deck monsters, there's Dizzy Tiger, who just negates flip effects when attacking, so it's an outdated effect that would need to be changed if it was printed today, and Dizzy Angel, who cannot be destroyed by flipping the table, so you'll have something on your field after using it, and that's all for the deck, so it needs a lot of work, but we love the theming and the mutual destruction playstyle is interesting. To expand on the archetype, I think they need more monsters that have effects on destruction, like ones that can summon themselves back after being destroyed, or recruit from the deck, or double burn damage from your bottles. And for the aesthetics, since you had dizzy versions of two unrelated types, make it a smorgasbord of other types that are dizzy, like Dizzy Dinosaur, Dizzy Wizard, and since the archetype is apparently based on a type of sword fighting, Dizzy Samurai.
You know what I would think about an overhaul for this? You could theme it off of different liquors. You could even make it hot sauce themed in the TCG to match it, which is very ironic considering in the art of flipping the table, it shows him throwing in everything but sauce. It's soy sauce, rice, fish, and soup. It makes me think of my archetype of choice that I play a lot, the Abyss Actors, which are spell cards that when they're set and destroyed by an opponent's card effect, have secondary effects. Maybe hot sauce bottle's effect is when this set card is destroyed, inflict 500 damage, or maybe it's while it's face up on the field, monsters your opponent controlled lose 500 attack because they're getting drunk, or like maybe they have a whiskey themed card and they get put into defense mode because they get drunk too quickly and they get sick, like a stumbling thing, kind of a lockdown floodgate thing. And then they have floating effects, kind of how the Draco Warriors do, where when the cards are destroyed or sent to the graveyard, they have secondary things like destroy a spell or trap, destroy a monster.
I also think they need a fusion boss monster since they were in GX when fusion was big. I don't know, just give it all the stuff. Double burn damage, search all monsters, maybe you can use flipping the table multiple times per turn if that helps.
Their boss monster could be like Dizzy Foreman or Dizzy Brewer, and his effect could be if a card your opponent controls would be destroyed by flipping the table, it's banished instead. And now on top of doing Floodgate Stall Burn, you also have board control effect that does destruction. Or maybe he has your opponent can't activate card effects in response to flipping the table. Flipping the table still needs to be a key card. It just needs extra protection. So maybe it also goes the way Shiny Sarcophagus for the Yugioh archetype is, where it can't be targeted by card effects or affected by monster effects. Every time I'm saying more of these things, I think it'd be really fun to play this deck. A lot of control, a lot of disruption, and then it's just a bunch of random guys. Oh, and then the workers are Aitsu, Soitsu, Koitsu, and Doitsu, but they're wearing different outfits. $1 million idea, Konami, print it. And then it goes to Dizzy Angel, and they're all fairies.
Finally, make flipping the table searchable. I don't know how this archetype would function if you can't get that out fast. So for being an interesting little archetype that could be an interesting moderately sized archetype, Dizzy wins this edition of Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime archetypes that have yet to be printed. Now, what did you think? Are all these archetypes something you would get hyped for, or should they just stay in the pits of obscurity in the anime? And what are some of your favorite anime-only archetypes, whether we discuss them in this video, another video, or potentially a future video? Let us know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and we will see you in the next video.